Hello, everyone. Welcome to another Live at 5 with me, your curator for the Cranbrook Center for Collections and Research, Kevin Adkisson. Today, on our Live at 5 Cranbrook tour, I have decided, because of the inclement weather, to postpone our Greek theater tour. And we will be looking at two chairs from the inimitable Eero Saarinen, the son of Loija and Eero Saarinen. And of course, if you're not a sort of Cranbrook groupie, Eero might be the Saarinen that you know. He would go on to succeed his father in the architecture office of Saarinen and Saarinen, and he would practice architecture from 1950, without his father, from 1950 to his death in 1961. Of course, Eero Saarinen is the architect of such landmarks as the TWA terminal at JFK, Dulles Airport in Washington, D.C., the Gateway Arch in St. Louis, the headquarters of John Deere, Bell Labs, IBM, CBS, the General Motors Technical Center, buildings at Yale, Vassar, and Penn. Eero Saarinen did a lot of work as an architect, especially when you consider how short his career was after his father's death, just 11 years. When Eero Saarinen died, he was the age that his father was when his father immigrated from Finland. Just to give you a sense of everything at Cranbrook was built in a lifetime that Eero, the son, never had. So what is doubly impressive to me about Eero Saarinen's architectural career is that he was a furniture designer the entire time he was an architectural designer. And he wasn't just a furniture designer who was farming out designs to his employees or just creating furniture for his individual projects. Eero Saarinen was a very serious and dedicated furniture designer, and he designed not only for his projects and his clients, but he also designed for the modern interior more generally. So today, I want to look at two chairs that are about 20 years, a little less than 20 years apart. One that Eero designed when he was 19 years old, and then another that he designed when he was 36 years old that went into production when he was 38. I'm here in Saarinen House, in the Saarinen House studio. Eero Saarinen never lived in the house full time. When he immigrated, he was 13. He lived a year in Chicago, then 2 years on Getty's Road in Ann Arbor with his father when he was teaching at Michigan. When the family moved to Bloomfield Hills in 1925, they lived in the dairy farm and then moved in with his older sister, the whole family, to Tower Knoll on Lone Pine between Losser and Telegraph. When Eero and Loija moved into this house in 1930, Eero was studying sculpture in Paris, just as his mother had done. He went from Paris to Yale, where he studied architecture. He then came back to Bloomfield Hills briefly, served in the OSS, in the precursor to the CIA during the war, and then when he moved back to Bloomfield Hills in the early 40s, he had his own place. But that does not mean that his presence is not made known here in what was essentially his home away from home when he was in college and studying. And so Eero designed a number of different pieces in Saarinen House. And one of them, our first chair on today's tour, is this little chromium beauty, what we sometimes call the Ypsilanti chair, because it was made by the Ypsilanti Reed Company in outside of Ann Arbor in Ypsilanti, Michigan. I don't know much about the Ypsilanti Reed Company, but maybe one day their archives will surface. The chair is an adaptation of a German form that had been developed by the great minimalist modernist Mies van der Rohe, who is the third and last president of the Bauhaus in Germany, or of the Dessau Bauhaus. And Mies van der Rohe designed his famous Bruno chair, BRNO, in 1929. Eero would have seen it when he visited the 1929 World's Fair in Barcelona. And he would have seen it as well when he visited the Bauhaus. So Eero was studying in Paris, but he was traveling all around Europe looking at different architectures and different designers. So Eero would have been aware of Mises and the Bauhaus's experiments in bent tubular steel furniture. And then chromium plating it, both Mises' experiments, but also Marcel Breuer's. However, this chair also dates to 1929, so it is almost an exact contemporary to the tubular steel furniture of the Bauhaus. The reason that I can confidently say is that he was inspired by that furniture is that even though the Bruno chair dates to 1929, the Bauhaus had been experimenting for a number of years with tubular furniture forms. It's just this exact model with the cantilevered seats, the arm forming the structure of the legs and then wrapping around to form the arm again and holding the back, is something that was happening in Germany at the same time it was happening here in Bloomfield Hills. Now, unlike the German models, which were made by highly technically advanced craftsmen, Mies had a tendency to use engineers from Porsche to grind his joints and to make his furniture perfectly constructed. The Ypsilanti Reed Company is not a sort of superfine craftsman, and so there's a sort of roughness to the Kingswood chairs here, where the rods that are holding the base of the seat are just bolted quite simply, and the bolt is left exposed. This is a contemporary reproduction of the original upholstery. Correct color, but it's a little bit smoother than the original upholstery. And those of you who are joining me who attended Kingswood School, you know that this chair was designed and used at Kingswood School for Girls when it opened in 1931. These were called the senior chairs, and these senior chairs sat in the auditorium. They ringed the auditorium, and I've pulled out my didactic over here. And so as an underclassman, you would sit in the interior space of the auditorium on folding chairs, and then the seniors each had the teal chairs. I wish I had a color photo to show you that the teal and chromium chairs around the room coordinate with teal lines that are painted on the woodwork, and then this is teal and aluminum leaf stenciling by Pipson, Saarinen, Swanson. Now, what's interesting about this date, I've talked about how this chair relates to the Bauhaus and to German modernism, but we have to come across and see another chair that Eero Saarinen designed in 1930, or 1929 to 1930, produced in 1931, the Kingswood dining room chairs, which are these little sort of Swedish neoclassical or Greek revival chairs. Very fashionable at the time in the Art Deco period to have these sort of adapted Klissmos chairs, especially in Scandinavia. But it's interesting that one mind, 19-year-old Eero, would design this wooden coral-colored classical chair for a room directly opposite his chromium-plated chairs. And one thing that Eero said about his early furniture designs, he was given complete control to design the furniture for Kingswood School. And he said that his furniture designs, he was a child of his age. And he was reflecting this period, the late 1920s, early 1930s, when modernism was not king. Modernism did not dominate the discourse. And so there was this great opportunity of choice. What would architects design? Would they design in the traditional styles? Would they design in modern styles? And most architects could deftly design in any style. And so Eero was picking up on that trend as a young man, designing chrome-plated steel furniture on one side, and then wooden Swedish neoclassical chairs on the other side, Klissmos chairs. So he goes off to Paris after he designs these. He's studying sculpture. He goes to Yale, where he studies architecture in the Beaux-Arts manner. If you've not joined one of our tours of Saarinen House before, I'll just give you a little sneak peek about I'll be doing tours here every couple of weeks, I imagine, whenever it rains. And so we'll talk more about Eliel's furniture design, this sort of French Art Deco, another day. But today we're focused on Eero. And he designed, at Kingswood, he designed about 38 different seating forms, including for the dormitories, the dining room, the headmistress's office. And then at the house here, he also designed the bedroom suite of furniture for his parents. Now, lucky you all, I just happen to have the headmistress's suite of furniture here in Saarinen House. This I was using for an exhibition last year. So this, we have more tubular steel bent furniture, but this time it's not chrome plated, it is painted black, and then has a wood-painted black desktop on it. And he also designed the headmistress's chair, which is again painted black steel with a woven reed base. And so Saarinen would have been paid by George and Ellen Booth and the Cranbrook Foundation for these designs. The Saarinen family then had sort of additional chairs made for the president's residence. And so if you came to a party here at Cranbrook House, they would have brought these up from the basement or from the garden patio, and they had a whole set of these chairs that they used as the sort of overflow seating in Saarinen House. And I can show you a picture of what the headmistress's office looked like, with the fabulous rug, hand-woven by Studio Loya Saarinen to Loya's design, and then Eero's suite of furniture with the tubular black-painted steel. Hand-woven upholstery on the lounge chair, and then the smaller table as well. Where are the rugs for this room? So this room that I'm standing in was called Eero's room. This was the son's room. This is where he would have stayed when he was home from Paris or from Yale. It's where the grandchildren stayed when they visited the house. Eero's older sister was 5 years older than him and got married when he was still a teenager. So he had nephews who were, he was only, 21 when his nephews were born. So the grandkids took over the room quite quickly. And the furniture that was in here while the Saarinens lived here was by Gilbert Rody. And then the other rooms were furnished with other pieces that no longer survive in the Cranbrook collection. So this room is part of the tour, but we use it as a flexible space to change out over the different tour exhibition seasons. So the next chair that I want to talk about is one of the great works of modernism, the womb chair, also known as the Knoll Model 70. And this chair came into the house in 1947, the original. This is a reproduction. And it was replacing a chair that Eero designed when he was about 20 years old with one that he designed when he was 36. And so I've pulled out a photograph of the original chair, which is in this sort of art moderne style. Very clean lines. It has the same upholstery of gold and coral that was hand-woven at Studio Loya Saarinen. And so it was a suite of furniture with the banquette here on the lovely green rug. And then on the other side of the room, you have the dressing bench, and then you had the red chair here. But in 1947, they got rid of the red chair and they replaced it with the womb chair. And the womb chair was developed by Eero Saarinen for Knoll International, the Knoll Planning Group. And Knoll, if you know much about design history, or if you've ever worked in an office, you have probably sat in a Knoll chair. They're one of the great furniture companies of America. And Florence Knoll, she was born Florence Margaret Schust. She went by Shu, and she was from Saginaw, or Bay City, Michigan, the thumb of the Lower Peninsula. And her mother died while she was still a baby. Her dad died when she was 10. And as an orphan, she was taken by her by her guardian around to different boarding schools in Michigan, and she was given the choice, where do you want to go? And she came to Kingswood School for Girls in 1932, and she said there was no choice. It was the most beautiful thing I had ever seen. And so she enrolled in the earliest classes of Kingswood School for Girls, and she told her architecture instructor, I want to be an architect. And he said, okay, well, or she said, I think it was a woman instructor, said, okay, well, build a model, do some drawings, let's see what you can design. She did those works. He said, you can be an architect. Marched her over to meet the Saarinens. And Eero Saarinen really took to this young woman and became essentially her father figure. She would spend her holidays, her Christmases here in Saarinen House. So she lived in the dorms and then came here at Christmas. And in the summer, she would travel back and forth to Finland, babysitting the grandkids. So she was like a third child to Eero and Loja Saarinen. After she graduated from Kingswood, she went to London and she studied at the Architectural Association in London. As war broke out in Europe, she came back and she studied in Cambridge with Walter Gropius at Harvard. And then she finally matriculated with Mies van der Rohe in Chicago at IIT. So she had quite an education from Eero Saarinen in high school to London to Gropius to Mies, and then back to Cranbrook where she studied architecture under Eero Saarinen again. She moved to New York in 1943 when she fell in love. She was working as an architect and she fell in love with her furniture sales rep, Hans Knoll. And at the time, Knoll made furniture that was very much traditional in style. They would make sort of your Queen Anne dining room, Chippendale bedroom sets, baronial furniture, all of the furniture at the Edsel and Eleanor Ford House in its revival styles. That's Knoll furniture. But what Florence did for the company was open up a new wing called Knoll Planning Group, and she launched modern furniture. Hans died quite young. Once he was no longer with Florence and with the company, she took over and she converted the company into a modernist juggernaut of furniture. Some of her innovations include painting the Knoll name on top of her moving van so that as New York office buildings would get replaced with their modern furniture sets, other people would look down and say, what are they moving in? And it would say Knoll across the top of the trucks. But she needed modern designers. She did design some of her own pieces. You can see those on the Cranbrook Art Museum website and other collections. But she really turned to her Cranbrook classmates, Charles and Ray Eames, Harry Bertoia, Ralph Rapson, Glenn Paulson. These were all people who went to work for Knoll or who designed for Knoll. Eero Saarinen was hired by Knoll in 1943 to begin designs, and in 1946 he brought to Florence's office a whole set of drawings and experiments that grew out of his earlier work with Charles Eames, especially the 1940 organic design competition. And these sort of swooping chairs, he set them down in front of Florence and said, I want to do a series of furniture in plastic. And it would become the world's first plastic chair to go into production. And Florence looked at all of the sort of models and photographs and said, start with this one. And Eero said, no, that is such a big chair. It won't fit in most homes. You want to start with a chair that's going to be accessible and that everyone can buy and beautiful. And Florence said, no, we have enough modern chairs on the market that are comfortable in one direction and that look great. What I want is a chair that feels like a basket of pillows and is comfortable for any chair, any body type. And Eero Saarinen accepted her challenge and said, the problem with Victorian overstuffed chairs is that the labor of them, making all those tufts, making this huge furniture shape, let alone the hulking visual mass, it all reflects a different era. He wanted to make a lounge chair that would be comfortable and have modern lines. And so he started using plastic. It's a fiberglass shell. There was no one who could do fiberglass at the time, so they went to a boat manufacturer in Jersey, and they used sisal, so grass, reinforcing the plastic shell, and they would do pressure and heat into the mold that had been carved in wood, press the plastic in, and then release the vacuum seal, and they would have the chair shell. Saarinen really struggled with what the legs might look like, and he struggled not only with visually what they would look like, but how do you attach something to a plastic form. He also wanted it to feel like a plastic, or like a basket of pillows. How do you upholster plastic? It was the struggle of these new materials like plywood and plastic, of how you join legs and upholstery to them. Saarinen, I think, comes up with the most elegant solution, which is the upholstery is completely floating around the shell of the chair. So the chair is essentially one large cone. You can see how it's a conical shape here. The tip of the cone is cut off, so the tip would be here, and it's growing out in that direction. And then he snips, or brings in, sort of pinches in, the arms of the cone, but he never creates a compound curve. So there's never a moment when the chair is curving in two directions, and you would have a sort of concave surface that you would have to get the upholstery to line up with. They're always straight lines. And so he's able to upholster the chair essentially by making a cone-shaped slip cover. And so that's the cone-shaped fabric is sewn around the back of the chair, and it's just pressure fit onto the chair. So he never glues the upholstery to the plastic shell, and he never has a single complex compound curve. They're all one-directional curves. The Saarinen's version was a prototype of 1947. It had an iron base, and it was upholstered in Marion Strangel's Devil fabric in green. That chair is still in the family. I did bring across today this fiberglass chair by Charles and Ray Eames, just to show you what a fiberglass shell looks like. So the fiber glass, the strips of glass are these look like scratch marks, and they're fit within the plastic resin. So this is what the womb chair would look like without its upholstery, but the Eameses are much more sensuous. They have these compound curves, so you've lost the sort of purity of the cone shape. Now, what's interesting about this story is that Loya Saarinen apparently did not like the womb chair. She put it up here because it had been a gift from her son. It was launched to the public in 1948 and was a huge hit. Eero was completely wrong. The public went wild for the womb chair, and then he launched the smaller versions later. He launched a sofa version, sort of bedroom chair size version, and then the office chair version, which is one of the great icons of American interiors. So the Model 70 run of plastic chairs becomes a huge success for Knoll, a huge success for Eero Saarinen. Loya Saarinen doesn't like it. She puts one up here in the bedroom, and on July 1st, 1950, she was reading a letter to her husband from Jean Sibelius. And Loya liked to sit on the settee, and Eliel was sitting in the womb chair. And when she finished the letter from Sibelius, she looked over and she said that her husband was serene and at peace. And so Eero Saarinen designed the womb chair, and then Eliel Saarinen, his father, passed away in the womb chair. When Loya Saarinen moved out of the house a year later, she took the womb chair with her. It was hers, not Cranbrook. And she then took this photograph, and I hope this shows up. Here, this is 1962. So a year after Eero died of a brain aneurysm, 12 years after Eliel died. And you see Loya is standing in her handmade crandemonium ball gown of 1931 with her son's womb chair that her husband died in. There's the double portrait of Eliel and Eero painted in Finland when Eero was about 6. You have the carpet from Saarinen House, a Finnish medieval bronze candlestick from their home in Finland, the portrait bust of Eliel that she sculpted, and you have the sort of legacy of her family all around her. It's quite a remarkable photo, just this real haunting, beautiful vision of a life of good design. Thanks so much for joining me for another Live at 5. I hope that you enjoyed this one. I'm going to try to run these tours as like we did today, sort of closer looks at objects in the collection. We do the Wednesday tours on Facebook that are more architectural, sweeping campus tours, like what you might get if you visited the center. But these Instagram tours are Tuesdays and Thursdays at 5, close looks at Cranbrook objects, and Facebook Live Wednesdays at 5. I will see you all next week. Thank you so much for joining.